Hello, welcome back to my channel. This is a bit of a different video than my usual stuff, but I thought I would make a video about clipping nervous horses. Quick disclaimer before we start, because everyone has to. I'm not a professional, I'm not an instructor, I'm not an equine behaviourist, I'm just a relatively experienced horsey person who has owned horses for the past however many years. So generally with clipping, I'm sure most of you clip in the winter, it's quite a common practice. For a horse that's never been clipped before, it's a bit of a weird experience. A noisy razor, vibration against the skin, it's a little bit odd, but if you introduce your horse to it in a sympathetic, correct, kind way, you're not going to have any issues really, because the horse has no reason not to trust you, you're going to be fine. However, there are a lot of horses who perhaps haven't been introduced to clipping very sensitively, perhaps they've just had a bad experience, they have a negative association with clipping, whatever it is. For some horses, clipping can be a very stressful experience. And I know that for my two horses, they're both nervous clippers, and I'll go on and talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But I thought that I would make a video detailing my experience with nervous clippers, how I've dealt with it, in the hopes that it helps someone else out there who's going through the same issue, because it can be a really problematic scenario. Otherwise, it's not a very pleasant experience when your horse is extremely stressed and upset. So hopefully this will help someone. So first of all, I'd probably better introduce my horses and let you guys know what I'm working with. So this is Jed. He is my 14 to 14-year-old Irish sports pony, and as you can see, he's an absolute legend. We do pretty much everything with him: cross-country, show jumping, fun rides, eventing, tacklers, trick training, you name it. He gets a crazy winter coat, like super thick, super fluffy. And although he's generally not a spooky pony really in general, he has a few anxiety issues, mostly with strangers, and he can be a little bit head shy around his ears just because he was handled roughly as a baby. So it's just these specific things that kind of bug him, and unfortunately clipping is one of them. I'm not sure why. I assume he must have had a bad experience maybe, or he's just lacks trust in people that he's not sure about. Every year he's been clipped by a friend of ours who is really good with him, but it's always a struggle. It's never easy. He's very stressed. Clipping is possible for him, but it's just generally an unpleasant experience. It takes a long time. So for me, I just wanted to make life easier for us both, since clipping him is such an essential part of his winter routine. So my other horse is Polly. Here she is, a 15-1, 17-year-old thoroughbred cross. She is almost the polar opposite of Jed. She's naturally a very anxious horse. Everything scares her, but she is also the most honest horse I know, and she always does her absolute best to do what you've asked her to do, even if it's scaring the shit out of her, bless her. For the past 5 years I have left her unclipped in the winter because it's just been more convenient, but it would be something that if I wanted to work her more, clipping would be useful. And I also think it's just an important thing for her to be desensitised to, because clipping is something that has always been a sticking point for her. The last time she was clipped was 6 years ago. It's the first winter I had her. I had been told that she didn't really like being clipped, but I wasn't made aware of how severe her fear was. So we had a professional come out. I was at school, so I wasn't there at the time to supervise, but I trusted this person. Mistake number one. She was so terrified of the clippers, she hid in the back of her stable, shaking and snorting and sweating because she was so stressed just by the sound. They tried twitching, that didn't do anything. The professional decided to have her sedated, and she had to be sedated so heavily that they couldn't actually get her head up off the floor. Her entire throat and chest area ended up looking like it had been shredded with a cheese grater, and I was absolutely distraught. I was so upset when I came back and saw her that I pretty much vowed there and then that I'd never have her clipped again. But I decided this year it was time to really tackle this issue, more just for a training and desensitising effort than anything, to be honest, because I could quite happily get away with not clipping her. It's just one of those things that, I wanted to put to bed. So now you know what I'm working with. I'm going to talk you through a little bit of what I did in the weeks approaching the day of the clipping through my desensitising training, and then we'll go from there. I started prepping for the day of the clipping a good 2 weeks in advance. I started every evening when they were brought in for their feed and their rug changes and their feet and all that. I'd bring out an old electric toothbrush with me, and I started by standing at their shoulder with a toothbrush in my outside hand, pocket full of treats, and I basically use the toothbrush as like positive reinforcement clicker training. So I turn it on, give them a treat, then turn it off. So these videos are from, I think, our 3rd or 4th day of doing this. So you can see Jed's still a little bit jumpy. After a few goes, they started to associate the sound of the motor with the treat, and although they're still clearly a bit nervous, you can see that as soon as they hear the sound of the motor, they start to look for the treat. So we're starting to build a positive connection with that sound of the motor. So once the initial sound was less of a concern, I started holding the toothbrush with a regular grooming brush, and while brushing them to get them associated to the sound, being all over their bodies. And this was also a good opportunity to identify any potentially problematic areas, such as under the belly or inside the legs or up by the ears. For mine, the ears were definitely a tricky point, but with enough time and gentle persuasion and rewards, they were soon really not fussed about it. I know some people don't like using treats in training. If you've got a particularly mouthy or nippy horse, I know it's not ideal, but I think in this kind of scenario it really is the quickest and most reliable way of building a positive association, in my opinion. If you want to try doing it a different way, then by all means, please don't take my word for gospel, but this is what worked for me, and I think it was very effective.
Good boy. Good boy.
So the clippers I decided to go for were the Liveryman Harmony Plus clippers. So they're marketed as a light-duty clipper, and they're marketed as being ideal for nervous or young horses because the motor is so quiet. That was a real key element for me, obviously. They have snap-on blades, so they're really easy to switch between a clipping blade and a trimming blade if that's what you need. So here you can listen to the difference between the toothbrush I was using and the Harmony Plus clippers. So you can see that the clippers are slightly lower in pitch, but pretty much the same volume as the toothbrush. And I'm sure all of you have heard an electric toothbrush in your life, so you know how quiet that is compared to a regular medium or heavy duty clipper. So I used the toothbrush every night for about a week, and I made sure that they were totally comfortable with me turning the toothbrush on and off, and taking the toothbrush all around their head and ears and any tricky areas before I started using the clippers.
Good boy.
So when I started using the clippers, I would start again with the toothbrush for a little bit, and then I'd move on to using the clippers. And I'd do exactly the same thing, start by turning them on and off and rewarding. And then once they were comfortable with the noise, I'd start going over the body. I also would take the flat part of the clipper and just hold it against the skin, because obviously as you clip, the blades vibrate, so that's a bit of a weird sensation. So I started doing that as well, just to get them used to the feel of it. So just doing everything I could think of that would help them. All good desensitising.
Yeah, scary butt. Is your butt scary? Good. Good boy. Good boy. Such a good boy. Well done, you. Good boy. Good boy.
So again, I did this for another week. With again lots of positive reinforcement. Each session probably only lasts 5 minutes, if that. Like, I really did not spend long doing this, partly just to save the clippers because it's not particularly good for them to be turned on and off, on and off, on and off all the time, but also because, especially at the start, it was still quite stressful for them, so I didn't want to be prolonging that experience for you know, 10, 15, 20 minutes, because it'll get to a point where you stop making any progress and actually you're just reinforcing the stress. So a quick 5 minutes of scary sounds, scary buzzing with lots of treats, and that was far more productive than a long, intense session. I felt for me that after a week of the toothbrush and a week of the clippers that they were comfortable enough for me to clip. Might not take that long for most of you, but then for some of you that have really traumatised horses, it might take even longer, and that's okay. You work to the time schedule that your horse gives you.
Good girl. Well done. I know. Good girl. Good girl. Well done. Good girl.
So the night before I planned to do the clipping, both horses got a full body bath. This is really important because it really lifts all the dust and grease out of your horse's coat, which can make clipping a real drag, and it's not good for the clippers either to be hacking through dirty, greasy, dusty coats. I really do recommend doing this before clipping. It feels like a bit of a faff, especially when it's cold, but you know, use warm water, make sure your horse is rugged up really well afterwards when they're dry, because I've seen horses clipped without being bathed, and it makes for such an effort. The clip looks really liney. It's not good for the blades, so just it's really worth the effort. They were stabled overnight to keep them as clean as possible, rugged up to the nines, and then the next morning I got them out and gave them both another good groom just to lift out any residual dust, and a good spritz with some coat shine as well, because again that just helps the clippers glide through the hair even more. Jed was going to get a hunter clip, so for him I kind of just winged it. I roughly worked out where his saddle patch was going to be, and then aside from that I just went straight at it. Polly was going to have a trace clip, so I used some chalk to draw out roughly where I wanted her lines to be. It wasn't super effective actually, because her coat was so clean, shiny and sleek with all the coat shine and shampoo. The chalk didn't really stick, but it worked well enough for me to work out roughly where I needed to go. It was definitely worthwhile because it's very easy to get carried away when you're clipping and suddenly realise you've gone way off where you were supposed to be, so having those lines definitely helped me stay on track. So that was all the prep done. Then it was time to actually do the clipping. But plot twist, this is actually the first time I've ever clipped a horse. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking. Probably not the best horses to learn on, but you know, didn't have any others. But all things considered, I don't think I did a terrible job. I'll let you be the judge of that later when you see the finished product, but in my opinion they look alright. So again, I started by making sure they were both comfortable with the clippers, started like our normal training process, off and on, treat, going around the body, treat, all that stuff. And then I just started actually taking the hair off. Polly was a little bit anxious to start. You can see in this clip her ear's on me, she's a little bit stiff in her body, she's not quite sure what's going on. You can see her front leg raising there. That's kind of a nervous tick she has. It's something she does when she's a little bit anxious. But literally after a few strokes of the clippers, she was completely happy, totally chill. And then she stood like a lamb for the whole thing. She was really good. I wasn't surprised, to be honest. I thought it was going to be a bit more tricky than that, but I was so pleased. She's not nearly as ticklish as Jed either, so going under her belly, in between her legs, was super easy. I left her face on because she's still living out, so I wanted to keep her warm but also take off the stuff that is going to keep her hot when she's working. Jed as well was also an absolute star. He's more ticklish, so areas on his belly and in between his legs and hind legs were a little bit more tricky, but the worst he did was move. You know, he just fidgeted a little bit. and then I just went back and did it again. These clippers are amazing. I was so worried they wouldn't get through his fluff, but they're just gliding through, no trouble.
Yeah, well, the bath would have helped.
Yeah, definitely, but like, you know, he's still fluffy. Good boy. This is the hardest bit, isn't it? Good boy. Oh, clever. Oh, careful. Don't move too much, I don't want to cut your ear off. Yes, good boy. Good boy.
Good boy.
Oh, this here was the most expressive he got throughout the whole thing. He literally just shimmied away a little bit because I didn't give him enough time to think around his ears. I was getting a little bit too excited at how good he was being. I don't think he's ever been clipped that close to his ears before. He's never let someone get in right at the base of his ears. There's always been a little couple-inch gap there where he doesn't let you go any closer. So I was so pleased. Good girl. Let me know if she feels uncomfortable. Oops. Good girl. A little bit ticklish. Good girlie. Good girl. You don't want to do anything really dramatic and try and like lie down on us. She has done before. She's a drama queen. Good girl, Polly. I'm sorry, put it down. Good girl. Good girl. Okay. Do a good little bit here and then do it again. Okay. Good girlie. What a good girl. Good girl. Good boy. A little bit ticklish. Oh. Are you going for the treats? You naughty boy. Those are just rewards only. Yes. Flies over my ear. Good dandruff, my boy. So here are the finished looks. I don't think they're too bad for my first attempts, but I'll let you be the judge. So I think that just goes to show how effective time and sensitive handling and correct desensitisation can be. Obviously I don't have any video evidence of what my horses were like before, so I appreciate that you might want to take everything I've said here with a pinch of salt, but I know in myself how traumatising clipping has been, especially for Polly, and how stressful the experience has been for Jed in the past. So this was a massive win for me and my horses, and I was so pleased. So yeah, just some final thoughts. I was so impressed with the Liveryman Harmony clippers. They were exactly as advertised. My only real concern about them before I used them was that they wouldn't get through Jed's fluff because he has such a thick winter coat, and I was concerned because they are just a light duty clipper. They're really just trimmers on steroids, really. But they did so well. They didn't struggle at all. They didn't heat up a lot either. I checked them regularly, and I think we stopped to let them cool down and oil for Jed like three or four times. I think the whole thing. Polly only once or twice. So they were really really efficient. So yeah, I definitely recommend them for anyone in a similar situation. Overall, I was just so impressed by how well this worked for my horses. I know I don't have any evidence of what they were like before, but honestly, if you'd seen Polly the way she behaved 6 years ago, or at least from what I heard about how she behaved, because again I didn't see it either, but I saw the evidence on her body afterwards. You wouldn't believe it was the same horse. I was so pleased, and Jed as well. There were years where he was being clipped where he just would get so overwhelmed and panicky that he would just completely panic. And, this time around he just stood like an absolute lamb. No questions, both of them. I was so pleased. So I think that just goes to show how effective this kind of training can be. And just taking your time. So yeah, I guess that's it. I really hope this has helped you. And if this method is successful for you, then please let me know in the comments. Or if you have any questions or any bits I forgot to go over or clarify, then please drop those down there too, and I'll do my best to clear anything up. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.